Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, I'm going to talk about a research project that I've been involved with, doing the evaluation part of this project. And it was called the Bumpy Road, and it was called the Bumpy Road. It wasn't called that originally, but the participants ended up calling it the Bumpy Road, and you'll understand why as we go through. I've chosen this piece of research to present on today as an example of, I suppose, where our program can work with smaller agencies, NGOs out in the community around a particular research issue, and where we can work together on a grant and use our skills. So without further ado, I'll move on. Okay, so the background of this research was it's about parents with intellectual and developmental disability who are overrepresented in child protection system. And what we know is that they're served up rough justice, particularly when they get into care proceedings in the court and experience differential treatment and outcomes. We know that if a parent with an intellectual disability gets into the child protection system and their matter ends up in care proceedings, they have now the figure that we know coming out of the UK is an 80% chance of losing their children just by virtue of going into the court. Rarely do their matters go to hearing. Mostly they're resolved in backroom deals between lawyers who decide based on parent capacity assessments done by psychologists and social workers on whether the child will end up going into care long term. So there's a lot at stake for parents when they end up in the children's court. So this project was funded by the Australian National Disability Insurance Authority through one of their information linkages and capacity building grants. And it was a partnership between the Wash House, which is a women's and family support service out at Mount Druitt, and Intellectual Disability Rights Service, a community legal service for people with intellectual disability, and the University of Sydney. The aim of the project was to produce a resource for parents with intellectual disability involved in care in child protection matters about enabling them to access information that they needed to navigate the system on an equal basis with others, in keeping with the UN Convention of the Rights of People with Disabilities, to understand their rights and to make informed decisions. We wanted the project to be inclusive. We wanted it to be parent-led. On the project, we had 2 paid project workers who had worked with parents with intellectual disabilities before, one from the Wash House, and the 2 workers were from the Wash House and had run groups for parents there before. We also had 2 parents with lived experience of having their children removed, and we paid them as co-researchers, and they worked alongside the 2 project workers. And then we had 7 parents with lived experience who were on what we called an advisory group, and that was 1 father and 6 mothers, and they were the group. Our role here at Sydney University, myself and Susan Collins, was we were consulted on the design. We provide training to the workers and to the co-researchers and the project workers on participatory action research. We track the progress of the project and its adherence to participatory action research principles, and we prepared an evaluation report for the NDIA. I think the motivation to participate for the parents, and this probably explains where I'm going to get to with the idea of this being grief activism, was why the parents decided to participate. The overwhelming reason was a desire to change things. They wanted to change things. I don't want others to go through what I've been through, was what the parents said to us when we asked them why did they decide to come on board. They were able to also see that the system was unfair. They knew that they had been in a system that didn't work for them. It's not fair that people have to go in alone and having their children removed. We have to change this. And they also wanted something for themselves. They wanted to know their rights, even though for some of them that did had children subsequent to having other children removed or had their children returned to them, they lived with this constant fear that kids could be taken again. And so they wanted to know how they could stop that from happening. So they saw it as a way of getting information for themselves. They also wanted to be connected to others. And they also had a belief that they had knowledge that was really important that other people got to hear. So they actually really thought that, they understood that they were experts by lived experience, and they wanted an opportunity to learn new things. So they were the reasons they gave us for wanting to participate. So there was 26 full group meetings all up, and they were held fortnightly. And then on weekly, the project workers and the research and the co-researchers worked together. And they ended up producing the Bumpy Road. As I said, it wasn't called the Bumpy Road when we started, but this was the name that the parents gave it. What they ended up producing was a website that was, as they said, made for parents by parents with lived experience. And they put that together. And I just don't know if I can do this. Don't know if that works, Joe. Joe, do you know if that's how to get that up? Just that one there?
This one or the second one?
That one there.
Sure.
Let's see if we can get this. So this is the parents describing it.
What is the Bumpy Road?
A group of parents made this website to help other parents. It's about working with community services and going to the children's court.
There are fact sheets and videos and tips from parents who've gone to court.
The fact sheets are about things like your rights, going to court, and working with community services.
And there's information about children.
Yes, like putting a child first, my child rights, and seeing your child.
It tells you who can help you and where you can go to get help.
The fact sheets are easy to read and understand. They have pictures and some words.
That's right. There are real stories too. It helps parents to know that they are not alone.
Check out the Bumpy Road website. You can Google it. You can see it on a computer, phone, or iPad. There is lots of information, and you can print the pages you want.
Yeah, so they put that together, and I invite you to go and look at that website. It's amazing the work that they put into that, and that was totally done by them. We're just that one. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, share. Thank you. Okay. So what we found when we did the evaluation was the thing that was most important for the parents was it gave them the ability to, they talked about sharing their stories. The majority of these parents reported that was the first time they'd been able to share their story and articulate their grief and loss. These parents are so stigmatized, so on the outer, that they had never actually got to do that. They said, we're all the same. We've all done the same thing, same experience. Everything wasn't a secret anymore. There were other people who that I could talk to about this kind of stuff, whereas in normal surroundings, I can't talk about it because I'd be worried that in case I got judged, a bit about why I lost my kids. So here they were, that they were able to share their story. That was really important to them, and the first stage of, and it was the sense that they were not alone. So while the participants acknowledged that sharing their experience was emotional, they also reported feeling very supported by each other. And the workers, the project workers in their evaluation said, even though this period dragged the project out, how important it was not to rush this. It was really about having to wait upon the stories and wait upon them working together as a group to come to what they produced. So that was really important, and they came together. As this one said, normally if you're somewhere else and someone gets emotional, it's like, why is she crying? Whereas this one will all, well, I know why you're crying. If one of us were upset, we automatically, the first response was to give comfort. We became like a little family in the end. So, and they talked about how they also gave each other, they also inspired confidence in each other. So this peer support that they had, So all the videos were made by them. All the easy English sheets were all designed by them, every one of them. And they worked out, how they would support each other with that. So those that were a bit nervous about performing and being on video, that they were encouraged by the others, said, I'm not so good at reading, but I did really well. And the other participants helped me in this area. So there's this real sense of peer support that went with this. And then through that, there was personal growth for each of them that they talked about. So improved social communication, improved negotiation. I love this one from Jess where she said, my confidence to deal with conflict. Probably if you met me 9 to 10 years ago, I wouldn't be able to do that, but now I'm more confident. So this idea also with emotional regulation, that being able to be in a safe place where I could let my emotions out, I actually learned how to deal with my emotions and learning new things. And then they talked about, at the end, it was very much they wanted to stay connected. What's next? What else can we do? And they have worked on other projects with us. And so they were very empowered to act. So from this one research, they wanted to do more. So I just want to talk about inclusive participatory action research as a form of grief activism. And this idea that grief, that these parents came from a place of grief and how they used their grief to actually want to bring about social change. And we see grief activism in a lot of areas of social issues. If you look at the Me Too movement, if you look at Black Lives Matter, where people's grief, where things that happen then will impel people to go, I don't want this to happen to other people. And so how do we use that grief to bring about change, and how do we do that within an inclusive participatory action research framework? And I think the important thing about grief activism, it's about recognition. It's about these parents had disenfranchised grief that wasn't acknowledged by the community. And so it was about, here they were saying, you have to recognize us, you have to recognize what this is like. And it was also about responding. It was about, we have to respond. We have to change these structural systems that prejudice us, that discriminate us, that exclude us. And so, and all of that was for social change, so other people don't have to go through what I went through. I think it's really important in terms of ethical consideration that oftentimes, when we're dealing with vulnerable, what we see as vulnerable cohorts, who have experienced trauma or grief, that we can be sort of quite protective. But what this group did, and particularly with the project workers, was not to deny them their grief, but to actually to provide them a safe space where they could actually use their grief for good. And so it was about managing that risk for sort of an emancipatory process. So that was really important. And so that comes to the project design and the recruitment and the management. So it was about the readiness of the participants to enter into this. They were ready, but I think most of them didn't realise how emotional it would be, but they were ready for it. But they were also supported by very skilled facilitation in the project workers who understood the importance of holding them in that grief space and not rushing that and trusting the process. So, so that was the bumpy road. They called it the bumpy road because they said that's what the experience of going through the children's court was. But it's to think about how we actually use people, how grief can be used as a form of activism is what I want to present today. So thank you.
Please stay there, Mark. Please stay there. Hello. Don't know if this is what it is working. Okay, cool. So questions, comments. That was wonderful, Mark. Thank you so much. And I just love the essence of, as you said, the participatory action research, the inclusive participant action research, and how that does facilitate a genuine connection to the community, especially in the context of research and the importance of mobilizing research that is applied, but also is meaningfully informed throughout the process of it being undertaken in the first place. So fantastic questions. Yes. And I'm just going to pass the mic just for the recording. That just helps with our ability to hear your question.
Thank you very much, Mark. I just wonder, with the statistics and data about 80% likely to have their children removed, whether this project, because of the clear development of the people involved, positioned them in a likely place to reunite with their children at all?
There were
Yeah.
certainly some that in the project who saw it as also a way of learning more, that they could perhaps go back for a Section 90 in the children's court. So they live with this hope. A lot of parents still live with the hope that their children might be reunited to them. I think what it did do when we actually presented it to the children's court, I think it was a real wake up to people in the children's court who often write parents off. And suddenly they saw these parents as actually being quite articulate, and these parents actually knew how the system worked. And so I think that in itself was how they presented themselves was, you can't ignore us, and we actually know what we're talking about. It's very common for parents with intellectual disabilities to be wiped out of even their own court process. Anyone can say to the court that the parent can't give instructions, and the parent can actually be silenced from the court case with a guardian ad litem being appointed for them. And so these parents, were saying, no, if you actually explain things to us, if you actually give us the information, we actually can participate in this process. And so I think it was really good from the perspective of their witness of what they did to people who are involved in the children's court to go, this is what parents can do.
Other questions, comments? Yes.
Since the launch of the website, do you have any data in regards to like how many people have used it, if people have found it useful?
Yeah, good question. I haven't looked at that. I should have actually had that figure for you. I'll take that question on notice, as we say on Q&A. But also I can actually say that I had a phone call. Just I did a consultation just the other day with a Department of Social Services set up a disability advocacy support helpline. And it was someone ringing and they said, we need some information of what we can give to the parents. And I said, well, have you looked at the Bumpy Road? And she goes, oh, I haven't heard of that. And I suppose that's the disheartening thing often, is how do you get information out there? And that is a constant struggle of how you do that. And I have to say, in this space, sometimes you sort of feel like, how many years do we have to keep on repeating the same thing? But yeah, but I'll just look up how many hits we've had on that. But yeah, and also one of the other issues why I can't give you that data is because also once these projects are completed, it's also who has responsibility for them, and that's also a problem, a limitation with these types of projects. Great question, though.
Last question, comment.
All good.
Oh,
Oh.
yeah.
Someone else.
Oh, okay. Any other person? Yes. Okay. No, I'll ask Sasha.
Thanks, Marg. I just wanted to know your thoughts on the role of the Children's Court or the law in more broadly in disenfranchising grief.
In terms of
Or, your work in this space.
basically once matters end, it becomes parents walk out and they're very sidelined, and that's a real issue in terms of parents who lose their children, or whose children go into long-term care. Suddenly, they lose a lot of support, and also, as the parents said, they feel judged. So, this carrying of stigma is a huge problem. There's been work done by Karen Broadhurst in the UK, and she talks about how many parents, they also come back into the court, and those parents are treated even more harshly the second time round, because it's like, you didn't learn the first time that you're not going to keep your kids. So they lose their kids the second time. And interestingly, she talked about that in terms of the replacement child. I'd have to say my work before coming to university was setting up the advocacy support program for the Children's Court for parents, and that was with IDRS. And that was not my experience. My experience was women who lose their children into care, particularly where there's intimate partner violence or exploitation. And when they then do have another child, it's not because they're replacing the child that is in care. It's because they have even less control over their bodies and their life to be able to stop, you know, it's not a resistant position to have another child for a lot of women. As one mother said, I can't afford to lose this child. I can't afford to keep this child.